welcome to Arena's Banking Behind the Scenes podcast. Episode 2, we're going to discuss the differences between banks and fintechs and when small businesses should consider a bank and when they should consider a fintech. I am Heather Twasson, and joining me today is fintech expert Will Shaw and banking expert Jason Alley. Welcome to the show. Will, you've been in fintech for 12 years. Jason, you've been in banking for 21 years. You guys have a lot of experience to share with this audience today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Heather. It's always a pleasure reconnecting with you and meeting you, Jason.
Yeah, it's great to be here as well. And I'm excited to be a part of the podcast.
So let's dive right in. First off, can you explain to our listeners what fintech is, Will?
Yeah, I mean, fintech basically is, combining two different words, financial and technology. So fintech is just short for financial technology. And it's a pretty broad term, but generally it refers to companies that are using technology to facilitate financial services to customers. In general, we've kind of narrowed it down to two different areas that are part of fintech now. So, you have your fintech infrastructure companies. So think your data aggregators, your payment firms, analytics behind the scenes, maybe even like credit scores. The second area is more customer facing. So these are the fintech firms that you're probably interacting with every day with your hands in or providing a financial product through a tech company. So think QuickBooks, Chime, Cabbage, PayPal, Square, Clover, depending on what you're utilizing. So, the idea is that fintechs have largely been disruptive by thinking a little bit differently about how customer experience could be and utilizing that different looks and feels, technological edge of speed. Sometimes financial institutions may be lacking in going to market due to the regulations around what is possible.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that, Will. Jason, can you just give a brief overview? I think this one's intuitive to our audience, but let's just give an overview as a reminder to what bank products that are offered to small businesses.
Sure. So banks offer generally the staple of financial services to small business customers. So these services can vary from, depending on what the customer's needs and the possibility of the, specific industry. All companies, regardless of size and scope, they do need deposit accounts, just a place to kind of store the cash and the operating funds. But now deposit accounts, often they'll need, options for, payments such as ACH services, wire transfers, merchant services for credit card processing. And then, small business credit cards are always a fan favorite, as well as reporting and additional benefits such as cashback and or, a points system that a lot of credit cards do offer. Some industries may warrant, the need for small businesses to use services such as cash delivery or, Brink's armored car services, things of that nature, or, possibly lock boxes for receiving payments. There's also the option for small businesses to take advantage of various options banks can provide for funding, whether that's, a startup company or even a more mature small business, things such as lines of credit, term loans, or SBA loans. Those are all very good options for companies as well that traditional banks offer. Overall, there's a myriad of valuable services that a bank can provide to help small businesses to get started or even to continue to grow.
Yeah, and in episode 1, we talked a lot about like how to interact with your bank, and I think that was super valuable advice. So for participants out there listening today, like if you're questioning how to interact with your bank, Jason gave a great amount of information around when to call your banker, how to interact, and what you should expect, and kind of the roles and responsibilities of the members of the team that interact with you from a bank. So listen into episode 1 if you're curious about that. Well, let's move on to the next question. So this is the crux of the entire conversation today. When should a small business consider using a bank versus using a fintech company?
If I can chime in here first, right? What I think is that every business is run differently, and the needs of your business are largely unique. I just want to kind of laid out some general guidelines, though, that I think are absolutely important. If you have a lot of needs like depositing bulk checks, cash handling in any capacity, in larger volumes, I should say, check cashing, simple digital needs, online banking, connecting to QuickBooks, banks are absolutely the right option. Banks have existed for a long time. before Americas was even rediscovered by the European explorers, right? Banks have a well-established trust that they built with their customers over time. Banks also have physical branches, which a lot of businesses have that need for those physical branches. Again, especially if they're handling a lot of cash. Say, fast food franchises, gas stations, bars and restaurants. They often have large cash depositing needs, right? So no fintech is going to be able to provide services around that. There's no technological solve at this point. And the economic environment is also changing fairly quickly. Banker may have seen similar business environments in the past, or has worked with other small businesses similar to yours, and they can provide that tailored advice to a business owner. Fintech hasn't caught up in that area yet, but to be able to provide those very specific tailored recommendations. On the other hand, if you're looking at different complex technologically based needs, accepting online payments, connecting to a Shopify account, looking for more holistic vision of your entire business through connecting disparate systems, fintechs are probably a better fit. If I would say they're more digital, they're self-driven experiences. If you prefer digital communications and digital service, they largely are driven entirely by that, so that if there are problems with your accounts, you chat with somebody online or very quickly send in an email and get a response back, right? I think that banks certainly have an important role, and fintechs have an important role. And it just depends on what your need is of your business in that respect.
Totally. Yeah, at Arena, we leverage a variety of different banking products and fintech products. And one thing that I can certainly share is the user experience, the infrastructure, the actual interface that you work with a fintech tends to be smoother. So if you're looking for something out there that is you're comparing a bank product to a fintech product and you need speed, a lot of times a fintech solution might be the answer. Although there aren't core banking needs, like you mentioned. Well, a number of things we still have at banks are, around moving ACH directly, sending a wire transfer. There are some fintechs trying to tackle some of that space. One that comes to mind that just introduced a really cool, cross-border payment is Bill.com. I think they've brought to the table a way to interact with the bank and start to take on some of those payment services that are pretty user friendly in a lot of ways. And the bank interface with that is a little bit older in how you interact. Now, if you'd like to interact with your bank and you want to build that relationship with your bank, which we talked about in the last episode, I would totally channel more transactions through my bank. Because it's just more of an opportunity to build that relationship. Because ultimately, the huge benefit of a bank is to having a relationship where they trust that you are going to be a great customer so that they can provide you with lending capital. And that is a win-win all around. Banks love lending money to small businesses, as well as small businesses get great rates when they receive capital from a bank. So it really depends, again, what you're looking for and what your business needs, exactly what you were saying. Well, let's talk about some other factors to consider. Let's talk about some of these, these terms out there that probably are a little scary to those who don't follow finance every day. The whole banking as a service, embedded finance, what are these things? Will, can you kind of break that down a little for us?
Very quickly, I would say some of the barriers are breaking down quick between banks and fintechs in a lot of ways. And where that kind of comes in is a term like embedded finance or banking as a service that you may have heard in the media or being discussed a little bit. What that really means is being able to provide a financial product at the moment a customer potentially needs it, essentially. That's the general gist of it, where it may look like Amazon's providing a product, but realistically, there's a bank in the background. This is just an example. Buy now, pay later is a really good example of that, where you're getting ready to pay out, and essentially you're taking a very short-term layaway loan, right? That's essentially what buy now, pay later is, immediately at checkout through your e-commerce platforms. So realistically, this is changing the way things are being done, but those barriers that have existed between banks and fintechs get broken down when those types of services happen. Interesting, I think it's worth mentioning. I want to say it was Jamie Dimon who said that he had more programmers at Chase than Google did, right? So there's a lot of technology happening even at the banking level. Fintechs are usually just the ones starting to disrupt that before banks get that adoption. And knowing that, it's always, the preference of the business. Do I want to be utilize a disrupting technology, but there may not be as much stability on it, or would I rather have a more stable service that I'm doing my banking with in that respect, where a bank comes into play? I always say, like, hey, for you and your business, you know what you need best. Google it first, call banker, determine what digital tools and services that your bank may offer, and what's available out on the internet. There's a lot of different optionality, either around payments or merchant services that maybe you can get cheaper elsewhere, right? Or maybe your bank is providing the best services possible for merchant services by partnering with the likes of Clover, let's say. And I think, something like maybe cash flow loans, maybe that's better suited for going with a fintech partner, right? Because they can facilitate those loans fast and quickly as you need them within 24 to 48 hours in general, if approved. So it just depends on what you need for the right product at the right time. Oftentimes, I would say by far, the bank is probably going to be the best way to go. But certainly, there's a lot of fintechs with a lot of different offerings that may be the exact product you need at the right time. Mm-hmm. Definitely explore what your bank offers as well. Phone calls to the bankers are the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, there's this kind of when fintechs first started to come to market, there was this kind of sentiment in the marketplace that, is it going to be the fintechs that survive or the banks? And it became, the story when fintechs first got off the ground is that they're threatening banks. That is not the case anymore. Just like you mentioned, Will, is partnerships between fintechs and banks has become normal. And when you find a partnership with a bank and a fintech, that gives you the best of both worlds in so many ways, because you get the speed and the user experience of a fintech, as well as the security, foundation, and relationship management that you get through a bank. So it is actually the best outcome, and is not an us versus them as far as banking versus fintech in any way. It's more of a partnership and an embracement of kind of more modern solutions for finances.
When all the layoffs started happening back in the fall in tech and fintech, especially, one of my favorite bankers that I follow in terms of thought leadership is a gentleman by the name of Chris Nichols at South State Bank. Shout out to Chris Nichols. What he said very specifically as this was happening was, bankers, there's an immense pool of talent out there around technology. Go get those folks in fintech, because they're going to help get your bank to a different level of technological capability very quickly. So, again, that's the whole idea, that banking and fintech, the barriers are breaking down fast.
And we talk about a lot about this at our company Arena, where we talk about this tech and touch, right? And it's this combination of both that creates the magic solution for your business in a lot of ways. And if you need help in, deciding what kind of financial stack of infrastructure you need, whether that's a fintech or relationship you need, whether that's reaching out to a bank and establishing one to get a lending facility in place, then there are people out there that can help you do that.
I'd like to kind of piggyback on what you mentioned before as well. And I think with fintech and everything potentially being faster, more automated, I think that's fantastic. And I think it's a great add-on to your platform for any particular company as far as their financial relationship with the bank and or fintech. I would like to comment on that. I still do believe that, with AI, and I had a conversation the other day with a tech company that mentioned that almost everything that I mentioned to him, he said can be automated, right? So whether it be project management and so on and so forth with AI or GPT chat or so forth, there is something to be said with what you had mentioned about whether getting financial solutions or, can you get, $250,000 in a loan in 30 seconds kind of thing. There should be a banker behind that, right? There is some technology that can do that, but also there is some thought process that goes into that, which needs to be, realized and socialized to folks where sometimes the bankers should be able to kind of circumnavigate around the fact that maybe you didn't get approved for that, but maybe you should. Or maybe you might have gotten approved, but maybe it's not a great idea for you to particularly take that amount of debt placement. So there is still a place with your traditional banker and a human being behind the scenes that can actually help you with that process. And when it comes to things like how you process your payments and what the costs and what the fees are and things of that nature, if it is automated, if you have a banker that knows your company and knows where you're going and what you're going to do next, there can be opportunities to alleviate some of those fees, right? And make it a little bit cheaper for you. So I don't think it's a competitive nature between banks and fintech. I think it's a great add-on, but I think it should be in addition where it's viewed as a team as opposed to competition.
Let's talk about customer service. In our last episode, we talked a lot about how your bank and relationship manager is 100% focused on your customer satisfaction. Let's talk about the differences between customer service and in a bank and customer service in a fintech. One thing I've experienced as a CEO of a company is sometimes some of my interactions and problem solving with fintech solutions is there's no phone number to call. And you have to do everything digitally. And whereas on the flip side of that, at a bank, I just pick up the phone and call someone. I don't even send an email. So there are two kind of extremes on how to manage customer service. Where do you guys think this is going to land in the future? Let me turn it over to you. Do you have any comments on kind of the customer experience and customer service aspects?
I do. And I think a lot of customer service is largely going to be driven through automated insights from information that the bank or fintech will be able to utilize, just seeing through your transactional spending and what your holistic relationships look like. Open banking is really going to help facilitate that. Open banking is largely a concept of data sharing and being able to share your personal or business data with whichever financial institution, fintech that you'd like to share it with in that respect. Giving you that more holistic vision that a banker can provide those insights on. I think eventually some automation will occur there where basic customer service needs can be met without necessarily talking to a human being. Like, hey, I need to understand what my balance is. Can you give me more information on this payment? I'd like to see more info. It might be fraudulent, and begin that fraudulent dispute process within the platform itself. I think a lot of that's largely coming. There might be some minor insights that could be made. Hey, we see from a cash flow perspective, you might be tight this month. If you need a loan, we recommend going to your banker, pursuing potentially a bridge loan to meet payroll this month. Things like that, I think, are important and insights that can be generated. I am aware of quite a few firms that are starting to move into that arena. I also am aware of a few firms that are connecting multiple fintech products and banking products together to create a very holistic vision of business. And by the way, those products are all the holistic view solution. Oftentimes are being distributed almost exclusively by financial institutions. Just to name a few: Boss Insights, UpSwat, Kodat specifically are utilizing that to give that more holistic vision of a customer, so that the banker can then intervene and provide and tailor the correct advice to the business, so they can see the full health of it by connecting multiple systems. And I think that's super important to being able to provide the right customer service at the right time for the client when they're seeking to view it, both with an in-person or phone call experience, as well as just utilizing, say, your mobile phone or a desktop.
Yeah, a lot of this is the kind of preference of the business owner, right? And how they'd like to interact. So that is a variable to consider as you think about a fintech that might offer a similar solution than a bank, is also considering kind of that customer interaction model that's established and which one you prefer. And sometimes there's frustration if you end up landing at the wrong place and it's not typical to how you like to interact with other companies like vendors, customers, et cetera. But let's start first with data management. Are there things you would consider from a fintech or bank perspective that our audience should be aware of?
You're right. And there are so many hacking events that fintechs are dealing with that as well. A lot of data protection, especially, is around user permission data sharing ultimately. Now, I will say, kudos to the banks here. They typically will not work with any fintech unless there are data protections in place that, around SOC 1, SOC 2 audits around data security, user credential handling, things like that to ensure that the customer's information is safe. I think that is a really important point that, banks are really acting as a fiduciary, not just of your money, but also of your data and your identity in that respect. Because, bad actor gets a little bit of information from you. They can certainly run wild. I will say very recently, somebody opened up an account in my name at Bank of America, and I've been dealing with it. No money was lost here, but it was like 4 a.m. while I was asleep. So immediately I called Bank of America about it and got everything shut down. But it's still possible, and you need to be careful about that. And that's why it's so important to work with the right fintechs. Same time, fintechs largely, not all fintechs, but the startups especially, tend to not be profitable and are trying to achieve a sense of profitability by expanding their capabilities. And it takes time, right? Banks in general are fairly profitable already by having multiple means of cash flow and where they're receiving revenue from. Whereas the fintechs are largely trying to find their footing. Banks are a much safer option, especially in these environments, right? So, and this is coming from somebody in fintech. I love the idea of disruption, but that comes at a cost.
Yeah, I think the general topic of security and where you're comfortable sharing your information with should be considered as you're thinking about bank solution for your finance needs or a fintech solution for sure. Yeah, cool. Those are all great points. Any final thoughts or tips you'd like to share with our listeners?
I have just repeated this over and over again. Do your research and compare what your options are out there. Some benefits of using a fintech versus a bank can very easily be explored and discovered online. Just understand that with a fintech, you're utilizing capabilities around technology. And ultimately, a lot of the banks are going to start providing more and more services around facilitation of technology for their financial services and products. But ultimately, it's easier than ever to utilize both. And this doesn't have to be a battle of, fintech, bank. Really, it's about the end user experience. So as business owners, I would absolutely say, figure out what's best for you, figure out the right balance, utilize services that make the most sense for your business, but certainly realize that, banks provide a lot more stability. A fintech might provide a little bit more convenience in that respect, but choose the right partner that helps your business succeed.
Actually, I agree with Will 100%. I think fintech companies and their services are a great add-on to the strategic financial platform for businesses today, especially the way that kind of the economy and technology is going. I think it's most important to note that fintechs are empowering banks versus competing with them, as we had mentioned before. And that a good mix of what works best for the small business to make them more agile, I think, is very important as well. That'll help them become more successful as technology continues to improve. And I think as Will had mentioned, do your research and find the right path as to what comes to be defining your process and what makes the business more efficient when it comes to technology versus the bank and finding the right products and services for you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your expertise, both from a banking standpoint and also a fintech standpoint. We hope that gave you at least the tools to help make some choices out there if you're a small business looking for a financial solution for your company. That's all we have today. Join us next time for another episode of Banking Behind the Scenes by Arena. Look forward to talking to you all again.